People think that accounting is a numbers thing, but it's not, right? It's a people thing. You know that.
Welcome to CPA Career Path podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Jim Wallace, the CEO of BPM, one of the top 50 accounting firms in the country. Jim has been in public accounting for over 30 years in a variety of client services, managerial, and leadership roles. So, hi, Jim. Thank you so much for being in our podcast.
Hello, Rosie. It is great to be here. I'm really excited to do this, and you're being kind. It's 40 years. I've been in public accounting for 40 years. It's a long time.
Wow, that's a long time. Before we dive in your CPA career path, I would love to know a little bit more about you.
Like I said, I've been doing this for 40 years. I have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. Ages are 26 to 36. And they live 2 in California and 1 in Salt Lake City and 1 in St. Louis. I'm married. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together since we were 15, which is how I got my first turn in California. I came to California for about 3 years in the 70s in high school, and we fell in love. And then my wife came back to Michigan with me, where we raised all of our kids in Michigan. And then when our youngest went off to college, she asked when it was her turn to be in her state. She's a 4th-gen Californian, and then I said, seems like now is a good time. And so she and I returned to California about 8 years ago, and I came to be the CEO at BPM. And as you and I were chatting a little bit before, I have 2 dogs. We're big dog people, and I have 2 dogs, a big 80-pound sheepdog and a little tiny 8-pound dachshund. And we split our time between Michigan and California. We have a farm in northern Michigan, and we spend 6 or 7 months a year there. And then we live in California 6 or 5 months alternatively in the winter.
Sounds like you're having a great life.
It's a good life. It's a good profession for a good life, right? That's what we're here to talk about.
Yes, that's what we're going to talk all about that today. So I just want to go from very beginning. I'm just wondering who influenced you, or what made you decide to go with accounting?
So I've had lots of wonderful mentors and influencers in my life, but my main one is my father. So my father was an executive, and he was a CEO of a publicly traded company. So I grew up in a household with parents who were in the kind of the same biz I'm in. I have 7 brothers and sisters. I'm one of 8. I'm the youngest. So it's only the youngest of us that moved with my dad in his job. So I moved to Boston, and I moved to California, and then back to Michigan. So he's the biggest influence. So did he influence me to become an accountant? No. I get to speak a lot to college students, freshmen who are trying to decide what they want to do, or juniors and seniors who are doing internships. And I always start by just reminding them that I'm a baby boomer, right? So it's different. It's completely different. So baby boomers didn't worry about the career. They worried about their families. So all I was concerned with was a good career that was going to support my family. Because I wanted to be a father, I wanted to be a husband, and I needed a job that allowed me to do that. And so public accounting was a great job for somebody who wanted to raise a family. And again, baby boomers, we were looking for one job for life. So public accounting offered a long career path, and that was what was important to me. So I was actually a double major. I was accounting and business administration. And I always thought I was going to the business side. But when I graduated or was getting near graduation and started to interview, the clarity around accounting profession was much greater. So being a general business major was really wide open, but being an accountant was very specific. You get a job in a public accounting firm, you get certified, and so that, again, for a baby boomer, that was a much clearer path. So that's what I chose.
For this generation, do you still recommend accounting is a good career for this current generation?
I certainly do, but not for exactly the same reason. So I have 4 children who are millennials, and I always tell them that, the things that you believe in is you need to find a job that is fulfilling, rewarding, where you agree with the mission, where you feel comfortable being yourself. So for all those reasons, not for the same reasons I chose, but for all those reasons, public accounting is absolutely an excellent opportunity for people to fulfill themselves, to find something that matches their personalities, their lifestyles. It can be a very flexible profession and very supportive.
So back to your time right after you graduate, you chose to work at Deloitte, one of Big 8 at that time, I believe. Why did you decide to work at one of Big 8 instead of just a medium or small firms at that time?
So I had two offers where I wanted to be. So again, geography-wise, I wasn't, baby boomers were not overly mobile, right? So I wanted to be where I grew up, where I was, where I had a network and so on. So the two great opportunities I had in the limited geography that I was interested in was Deloitte and another firm, which I ultimately, as we go through my career, you'll hear the name again, a firm that was called Rehmann. At that time, it was Raymond Robson. And the Robson and Raymond Robson was a longtime family friend. And so my decision was to go to the Big 8 because I really wanted to start my career not at a firm that was connected to my family or was a family friend. I wanted to kind of plow my way and see what I could learn and then go back. But later in my career, I did end up back at Rehmann.
Can you share your experience when you work at Big 8? What is the advantage and maybe some disadvantage working at big size firms?
So certainly advantages experience. I worked on huge publicly traded companies and learned a ton. And I worked with some amazing people who taught me a lot. And then the disadvantage, certainly then and maybe still now, was the flexibility. An upward mobile path required a lot of moving around. So I was assigned to New York City for an extended period of time when I had a baby at home. There was other people who, in order to be partner, you had to relocate or change your cities from your states, or maybe even when I was there was often an overseas time that was required, a year or 2 years or 3 years overseas in order to make partner. So that was a disadvantage to me because, again, I was all about being a father, being with my family, with my kids. So that was a disadvantage to me. So the experience is amazing. And I would say the flexibility and the career path walls that are put up at that time were a challenge.
Now we can just do all the virtual calls and then virtual audit. Do you think that traveling or that moving to different locations like that could be limited for this current generation at this time, so people do not have to worry about, I chose public accounting or I chose audit, but I did not have to travel that much as in the past?
Yeah, so it is certainly a factor to be able to work virtually. Is a big factor. We're very supportive of flexible work environment at BPM. We have about 1,400 people, of which 500 are not assigned to any geography. They're in our virtual region. And then even those who are assigned to a geography, their requirement to come into the office is minimal. We don't have, set days or requirements for people to come in the office. I don't think that's universal. So I would suggest that everybody be careful firm by firm and find out what their policies are. Some firms require 3 days a week. Some firms require people in their first 2 years to come into an office. So just you need to get a deep understanding of that before you accept a job or what's best for you. But I think we're all challenged with the same thing, which is that our profession is an apprenticeship model. So, you have to work to get your license. It's built, your college education is foundational, but it doesn't teach you really what you have to do, whether advisory, tax, or assurance. You're not learning nearly enough in college to actually do that. So we're an apprenticeship model, and the virtual environment is very challenging to do an apprenticeship. So what I tell our partners is, right, if you had a plumber come to your house and they'd never installed a sink before, and that was their first sink, they're not going to know how to do it. right? The way they learn how to do it is working with somebody else who's installed sinks. And it's hard to do that virtually. So that's our goal, is to master that and figure out how to adapt the apprenticeship model into a virtual remote work environment. And we don't have it down yet. We're still working.
That's interesting that you mentioned about the college degree. So I just want to see what you think if for people who do not have accounting degrees, but they change their career, they shift their career from whatever they're doing right now to accounting, brand new to them. They didn't have any experience in accounting, didn't take any courses in accounting. How much chance for them to grow in the accounting career?
In terms of accounting firms first, besides accounting specifically a career, we have in our 1,400 people, we have hundreds and hundreds of them who are not accountants, right? So they're doing advisory work or, any other kind of work that is still a great career to be in an accounting firm if you're doing that. People who want to be an accountant, then there are lots of great programs. I know like Santa Clara State has a program specifically for somebody with a degree, but not an accounting degree, which then gives them enough credits to sit for the exam. Lots of firms like we do will pay for some or all of that as they become accounting ready to take the exam and so on. So there's lots and lots of opportunities for people who find it. And then there are roles in accounting that don't necessarily require a degree or a CPA where you can still be involved, whether it's inside of a firm or if it's just in accounting in general. We employ people in South Dakota who do not have accounting backgrounds, but they want to learn how to be accountants. And so they work every day in our office in South Dakota doing work for our other offices and they do not have accounting backgrounds. We're teaching them. It's the apprenticeship model.
That's interesting. Because I actually do have a friend actually just reached out to me literally just last week asking about accounting, about CPA. And I was like, please come on in. We need people.
We need people. We need good people with personality. People think that accounting is a numbers thing, but it's not, right? It's a people thing. You know that. Look what you're doing right here, right? It's a people thing. It's all about how you get along with people. It's all about listening and being able to explain things. And so we need lots of people who have common sense, who are good with people, good communicators. We can teach them how to do accounting.
That's why I just had the conversation with Denise, the CAS CPA CEO and president. We did talk about like right now, accounting is not just about work, not just about numbers, because we have technologies jump in. We have AI jumps in. All we need right now is about personality, how you work with people, how you explain number to become common sense for people who do not have knowledge about accounting. They can understand that how you can survive in this technology age. That's what we just talked recently about that as well.
Yeah, Denise is great and certainly really in tune to the profession with millions of people in California looking for accounting jobs.
Yeah, I love talking with her as well. After you work at Deloitte, you moved to another firm. I believe you work at another firm for a short period of time. Can you share the reason why you work at that firm for a very short period of time? And are there any lessons you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, so when I left the Big Eight and I didn't immediately go back into public accounting, I went and worked at a client, which is very common, right, in our profession. And there was lots of lessons that I learned in there. So one of the first lessons I learned is I thought that I was working too much. I wasn't with my family enough, and I didn't have enough time with my children. And when I switched jobs, I realized that I was equally responsible for that. Right, that wasn't just the fact that I was working in a Big Eight. It was also me. I wasn't putting up enough boundaries and so on. And so when I got to the new job, I continued to work too much. Right. So if there was work to be done, again, it's a baby boomer trait. If there's work to be done, you don't go home until it's done. So you just stay at work and do work. And so that was a problem. The other lesson I learned was I left and went into an S&L, a savings and loan, which don't even exist anymore. So many of your listeners and viewers maybe don't even know what an S&L is, but it's a savings and loan, and it was a kind of bank. that went out of business in the late 80s and early 90s. And I went to work at one in the late 80s. So that was a bad choice. And the third lesson, which was a good one from my father had always said, if you think that your work or your boss, whatever, is unethical, get out and then decide if you were right later. Don't stay and find out. So I did. I thought the situation had reached an unethical point. I got out, and 6 weeks after I left, the government took them over. So I had gotten out on my own terms and got back into public accounting. And so lots of good lessons there.
You mentioned one good lesson, it is setting boundaries. I believe a lot of people are struggling with setting boundaries. I have read so many books about setting boundaries, and I'm still learning about it. How can you improve your boundaries over time?
Well, so I think you have to make sure that you're looking at it as a two-way street, right? So it's easy for the colleague to have an expectation that the firm or their supervisor will set the boundary. Oftentimes they're older, they have more experience, right? They've done this before, so they should know how to set the boundaries, but they have their own inputs, like this needs to get done. I got a client calling me, right? I worked more when I was your age, right? So they've got their own stuff going on in their head, right? So it's got to be a two-way street. You've got to reach out to them and give parameters, and then you've got to flexibility means being flexible both ways. And so you've got to be flexible, but you've got to expect your supervisor, your employer to be flexible, and you have to talk about it clearly and not expect that people know what you're thinking or know what you want. And then again, you have to be reasonable. We are in a service business, right? So the client, as long as they're paying and they're not mean or inappropriate, right? We're here to serve the client. That's what we do. And so depending what you do, if you're working on SEC clients and they have a filing that's due Monday and it's Friday, then you have to do the filing. It's not optional. But what you can do then is hopefully you can get Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off to spend some time or get the things done that you needed to get done. So that's an extreme example, like with an SEC registrant, but it's that kind of two-way flexibility and communication. That's the key.
So back to the communication again. Sounds like everything is just about communication because people don't know what you think and you don't know what people think. And so have you ever been in the situation that people comment that you over communicate? Is that a problem?
Well, if you mean over communicate that you talk too much, sure, I've been told that I talk too much. But I don't know if that's the same as over communicate. So I think communication is a positive thing, right? If you're communicating effectively, then you're not talking too much because you're saying enough to get your point across, but not too much. So I don't think you can, if the definition of communicating includes effectiveness, then I don't think you can over communicate. You can talk too much. Yes, and we need to listen in any job, and the newer you are, the more you need to listen a lot. But especially when you're new, you need to ask a lot of questions, because again, somebody even who's 3 or 4 years in their job longer than you, they forgot that was a question when they were new, because it's not a question to them anymore, right? And so you need to be comfortable asking questions, how to do things, and then if you don't understand, asking again and taking notes, right? Write down, make an entry in your notes somehow about what the answer was, and so that you can remember what you were told.
Yep, ask questions. I always recommend new staffs. You should ask questions as many as you want at this time, because the more you move up, the more people will expect you to know a lot of things. So first year is the best year for you to ask, because they have no judgment there. They assume you as a zero, and so they will explain to you very details for everything.
And it's much more important now than when I started, because I was an auditor. So I would sit in a room with anywhere from 3 to 10 other people, and I could hear all of their questions. And I could hear the comments or review notes that were made. So the senior might tell somebody what they could have done better or how they could have taken a different approach. And so it didn't even have to be about me, but I was hearing that because I was there. And now when we're remote, all those conversations are being had one-on-one, and there's no group benefit of all those things. And I think that's the biggest missing piece in the apprenticeship model that we have to figure out how to replace. One way to do that is to get a lot more questions from the new person, right? If they're constantly asking the questions, because they don't even know what they're not hearing in the room.
Well, you mentioned about that because I worked in audit before, and I remember my first year busy season in audit, it was COVID year. So we have to work remotely 100% at that time, and it's brand new. We don't know what we were going to do with this. It's just confusing. It's so difficult at that time. So what we did is that we have all the team of 5 people. We stay online the whole time from morning to the afternoon. If anyone asks questions, just ask through that call, so everyone else still can listen to the conversation as well. I don't know if that's what people doing now that they can do that, because I'm not working in audit anymore. So I don't know if they still keep doing it or not.
There is some of that, but it's not, I don't think it's a universal or a requirement. So we have two main ways, right? That we have just teams where people can just sit in teams, but then we also have virtual office software where you have your own desk and there's coffee rooms. And so people can go in and work in the virtual office software. Then you can get up and go to the coffee room and talk to somebody, just chit chat, and then go back to your desk and work. You can shut your door. And so if, you're trying to work heads down, but somebody needs you, they can knock on your door, you can open it. So yeah, there is some of that. I'm a big believer in that. I wish we were doing more of that.
Yeah. Because for me, I love talking to people, and even sometimes traffic in California is just crazy. I was it's difficult to just spend 2 hours in traffic during busy season. I can finish so many things in those 2 hours if I just work at home. But I have to agree with you that sitting in the office, overhear other people's conversations, I could learn a lot from that.
If you were new, you're an auditor, right? If you were new, new auditors often get cash. So you're working on cash, but the 2-year person next to you is doing a harder area like receivables. So and they're asking the senior, questions about, so even though you're doing cash, when you get to receivables next year, you heard those questions, right? Now it's in your head and you're going to know more. And that piece is gone right now, or not as effective. And we've got to figure out how to get, without requiring people to show back up in an office, like you said, have a commute that's effectively a waste of their time in their view. We have to figure out how to recapture that experience.
I'm very excited to see what solutions we can have for that.
Me too, because I don't know what they are yet. So.
Me too. So when you moved to work at Rehmann for about 25 years, you move up in a lot of leadership roles, from assurance department to director of assurance services to become a COO. I'm just wondering, each time you move up, what the best lessons you learn from each promotion?
Well, so each one, I don't know, I'll give that one more thought, but one lesson that applies across the board is you have to replace yourself before you can be promoted. And so actually that lesson I learned in the Big 8 when I went into the managing partner and asked what I needed to do to become a senior. And his answer was, you needed to replace yourself as a second-year staff person, as an in-charge. I was an in-charge, right? You need to replace yourself as an in-charge, because his point was that is always the way it is. So we constantly have to be training those around us to take your job, because people are hesitant to move you up until you've trained someone to take your job. So that's a general rule across anybody who's aspiring to advance, which kind of is counterintuitive, because you're thinking, well, I'm spending my energy helping other people. But that's another lesson I would offer, is that the key to success, the key to me becoming a CEO, is that my energy was focused on helping others, not myself. And again, that's the lesson I learned from my father. My father always said, focus on others, and they'll suck you along in their wake when they're successful. And so it's really important to put your energy into people around you and let them take you along with them on their journey. And if they see you as the person who helped them get there, then they'll do the same for you. They'll help you get. So that's another important lesson, I think. And then, really in any position, it's about listening and being kind and understanding and empathetic. So people want to work with you. They want you to help lead them. They want to learn from you. And you do that by just being kind and empathetic.
So you mentioned about help other people. For me, from my viewpoint, it's easier to help people if you are as a role of CEO, you might just travel to different offices and you see them in person. You can just communicate with them. But right now you are in the mix of in office and virtual. So people who 100% in virtual meetings or in virtual job, how can you help them? Do you set up a regular calls, or do you set up a regular monthly, quarterly meetings with them? I'm just wondering, how do you do that?
Yeah, so all of those things. So I have different cadences for different people depending on their levels of experience and so on. So I meet with some people on one-on-ones once a week, others twice a week, others once a month. And then lots of group meetings. So the whole team comes together in those situations. So certainly helping other people through direct mentoring is one way. But what I'm talking about is more of our mission at BPM is to help others be successful in work and life. So it's not just in mentoring a specific person, but it's more about your attitude of what you're doing every day. So every time you come across somebody, whether it's to provide them an evaluation or coach them in their job or just to check in with them, right? You're coming at that from, what am I going to leave for them that helps them get to their personal and career goals? So each interaction, every interaction, if you enter it with that attitude, then you know what? They'll reflect that back, right? So then they're about, well, what can I do to help Jim get what he wants? Right? Because he's always worried about what I want, right? And then you go together, you rock it off together. And so again, it's more about your philosophy of life than it is about what specific tactics you use in any given situation.
I like that. It's like I remember it's not exactly word by word, but if you go by yourself, you can go fast, but if you go with other people, you can go further. Something like that. I like that. It's kind of the same concept.
So when I started, I was in an organization where we were in a big room with thousands of people, and we were told, you were all top of your class, or you were all leaders, and which of course I thought was funny because I had a 3.2 GPA and I never figured out how I ever got in that room to begin with. But anyways. So, and they say, look to your right, look to your left. Those people won't be here 3 years from now, right? So what I tell our team when we're all together, at our all hands meeting or something, I say, look to your right, look to your left, and figure out what you're going to do to help them be successful. And then they will help you be successful. So it's not about that they're going to be gone. It's about how do you help them stay, but maybe they don't want to stay. So maybe it's be successful not at BPM, not in public accounting. That's okay too, right? So my dad used to say, if you judge yourself by how many people stay working for you, you will be unsuccessful a lot because people go do other things, right? But if you judge yourself by whether you help them get to where they want to be, then you'll be successful more often. And we all want to be successful more often, right? So
you learn a lot from your dad.
I did learn a lot from my dad because we lived it every day. We lived at dinner. We'd hear stories about work. He was in the lumber business. So on vacations, we couldn't go on a vacation without stopping in every lumber yard that we went by to see how they were stocked and how they ran. And spent a lot of time in lumber yards. And then I
That's so
worked in
good.
lumber yards in college and high school. As soon as I turned 16, I started working in lumber yards.
That's so funny. I'm just wondering now, as being a dad and you have 4 children, how did you teach them about financials? How did you direct them to decide which career they should go?
So in terms of what career I really encourage them to chase what they loved, and they're all different. So my son is IT, and he was natural to IT. You know, he grew up in the era of the developing PC, and he's 37, and so he's always been focused on IT. So we just encouraged him to chase that. You know, he had some times where he started his own businesses or whatever, and we just supported him in all of those things. My next son wanted to be in business, and so he took business courses, and then he got really interested in the environment, and so he mixed those. So he became an environmental business major, and then he's now followed that into marketing and product development. My third son always wanted to help people. Even when he was little, he would say, you know, what do you want to do, Jake? And he'd say, I want to help people. And then that moved into, I want to help people who are sick. And then it was, I want to design things that help people who are sick. So I want to make, you know, joints, or and then that went to, I want to do surgeries. I want to put those things in people who are sick. And eventually, so he is a doctor, as you would guess. So he's a surgeon, and that's what he does. And then my fourth child has always been into growing things and food. She's a foodie. She loves food. She's Asian. She loves her Asian culture. She loves her food, Asian food, and she always has been that. And so she's a horticulture major who works for a farm-to-table restaurant. So she grows the food to be served in a restaurant. And she went to Michigan State, and she's a horticulture major, and that's what she does. So they all chase the things they liked. And as a parent, our job was to support them in that.
I was wondering, how did you teach them about financials when they were younger?
So they all worked. So I come from a family where I never got allowances. My siblings never got an allowance. My kids never got an allowance. If you needed money, once you were 12, if you needed money, then you could earn money. If you went out with us, with your parents, then we would pay for things. But if you wanted to go out with your friends, you needed to generate money. So they all ran businesses. My kids ran a lawn business from the day they turned 12 until they got jobs at 16 or 17. So the oldest would be the boss, and the second one would be the worker. And then the oldest would get a job, and then they'd step up, and the next one would step in, except for my poor daughter. So she didn't have anybody younger than her. So she did the whole thing herself, just by herself. She ran the lawn business by herself until she was 17 and got a job. And so they knew about expenses. They knew that they had to buy gas. They knew I paid for the equipment, but they had to maintain it. They had to help me maintain the equipment. And each of them had their own little business starting at 12.
That's so cool. Wow.
I think they appreciate it. And my daughter especially, because when she got her internship at a landscape business, they couldn't believe that she could do everything. She could fix a lawnmower. She could change a blade. She could put a belt on. She could string a stringer. And they were like, where did you learn all this? She said, I've been doing this since I was 12. So she knew how to do everything.
Wow. It makes me remember when I was 12. I think I just knew how to use money to go to supermarket, buy some food, negotiate about that. I learned about negotiations. I was like, this vegetable is about 1,000 Vietnam dong. I was like, can I buy that for 800 Vietnam dong? So
well, that's probably a really important skill at 12 for you.
It was, yeah. It's just funny that I went to supermarkets so often that one time I forgot to bring money. And I still came back with tons of food on my hand. And my mom was like, how could you get food? Money is still on the table. And I was like, well, they trust me. They said, you just get the food and then just pay them the next day.
Well, so that's a good skill to have too, getting people to trust you. That's a very important skill.
Yes,
Especially
yes.
in our business, it's really, that's all we have is trust. People trust us.
Yes, that's what we will talk about. When you have a CPA license, there is a level of trust, level of respect that people will give you when they see you
That's
out
right.
CPA.
Yep.